Shri Gurubhyo Namaha and good afternoon to all of you. And firstly, let me recognize the presence of my teacher of so many years, Mrs. Hemlata Seshadri, who is also the principal of this esteemed school. I have great memories of the time that I have spent with her. And I must say that she came to us first as a teacher for English literature in 2008 June. And later on, she of course handled history for us in class 10, and I have evergreen memories of those days, and we've learnt a lot from her. And the way in which the MUN here in this school has happened from the after movie, what I was able to see, great and amazing. It takes a lot to hold Model United Nations on a virtual platform in a very challenging environment like this for school education, and it's been a great success from what I can see. And my own morning experience in 2008, I was sent by the school for the first time to the General Assembly there. And it was a daunting task. I didn't know what to do. I sat there silent for 2 days. I didn't know what was going on around me. Then for 2 years, I didn't want to attend any MUN. And later in 2011, I attended one of the MUNs and I won Best Delegate. Then in university again I had a chance to attend the deliberations of MUN, the World Health Assembly. And it was very exciting, of course, that was pre-pandemic, and I'm sure that the World Health Assembly here, from what I can see, has had a huge task in debating what the implications of the pandemic will be. So that is about my morning experience, and I'm sure it's been 2 long days for all of you, and I don't want to detain you for a long time talking about history or giving you a lecture, but I thought it's essential in this age and stage that all of us understand what a worldview consists of or what it is comprised in. It's easy to say that you have to read a lot or to write or assimilate or internalize what you read, especially in this area of social sciences, the humanities, with international relations. There is a lot to be said about this, and I've just compiled a few of my thoughts. I mean, most of the categories that I'm trying to address are lifetimes of research, and it's not one lifetime, it's 7 lifetimes of research. It was not enough to talk about what I'm trying to put through here. But as someone who's been very passionate about international relations, history, global studies for a long time now, right from my days in middle school, and fortunately I studied in a school like Padma Seshadri that encouraged me to read so much and gave me a platform to express my views. Going into my presentation, starting every Munnar or every person who wants to study international relations has to know the beginnings of nations and nationalism. What actually was a nation, or what was understood as a nation? I remember Ms. Hemlata Seshadri handling classes on the allegories of the German nation, of Italy, the unification and all that. And all of them have so much of salience in this debate. And nations and nationalism assumes a lot of importance, especially where in this era of globalization, where there is so much to be said about what nationalism today all about is. And let me now refer to what Sir Ponnambalam Ramanajan, one of the greatest Ceylonese of his times in the Crown Colony of Ceylon, he was a great colonial statesman, had to say about nationhood. And I quote, and this was his deposition to the Donamo Commission in Sri Lanka, as Ceylon as it was known. Mere occupation of land and living to eat, drink and be merry is not nationhood. Its principal feature is deep attachment to a glorious past and the preservation of its precious memories and possessions, by which a corporate self-consciousness is kept alive and invested with a peculiar dignity. This, according to me, sums up the entire debate about nationalism during the colonial time. Some psychologists and political scientists feel that patriotism is actually a biological and emotional feeling of attachment to one's own land, one's own place of existence. And nationalism is a more cultivated form or a more evolved form of this when it is taken in groups or encouraged in communities. Now, coming to the growth of nationalism, it's had a long journey, and the way in which nationalism has progressed, right from Europe then to America during the First World War, Second World War, much has to be said about it. And what we're talking essentially is about what Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, the former President of India, one of his extraordinary essays, when globalization as a term was not even known, is this essay, Emerging World Society, which was published in 64, but it was written much earlier from what I gather. The Emerging World Society talks about the citizenship of the world, and that is what MUN is all about. At the time when the United Nations was formed, everyone thought that it's going to be a supra-state and it's going to be an organization that's going to boss over countries. But far from that, it has encouraged what is called multilateralism, the growth of a global consciousness which has immensely interconnected the East and West in a way never seen before. And I would like to quote from one of my favorite readings by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Eastern Religions and Western Thought, about the Emerging World Society, of course, in a different context. And I quote, "The supreme task of our generation is to give a soul to the growing world consciousness, to develop ideals and institutions necessary for the creative expression of the world's soul, to transmit these loyalties and impulses to future generations and train them into world citizens." Unquote. This is essentially the task which is before an organization like the United Nations and a simulation like the model United Nations. And when you're talking about lobbying for policy making or trying to put through a resolution, how many friends do we make who are cross-cultural? In reality or in physical, we meet people from very different backgrounds. And let me tell you, that's the greatest learning exercise that I have seen. Because as I'm going to explain, diversity and pluralism are two very great ideas that have come to occupy the intellectual mind in the last 200 years. Of course, it has been there ever since the beginning of humanity, but this slides into the next category, global communities and modernity. By the time of the First World War, it was seen that certain nations, because of the benefit of colonialism and conquest, had grown to a certain stature. Resources were at their command. And to know how they manage resources or what exactly the impact of colonialism was, I mean, it's again, as I said, the study of a lifetime. And the forms of knowledge that colonialism has produced, the kinds of people that colonialism has produced, and this discussion is of such importance to all of us, and especially those who are looking at a career in the humanities or social sciences. Please read about this, which will inform us much better. I'm not going to keep telling you read this, read that, but when we start reading, we get into different worlds of experience, and those different worlds of experience really make us think so much. And it's a process of both learning and unlearning at times. The paradigm of modernity. Modernity is not about clothes, it's not about the schools or colleges that you attend, the languages that you speak, or the stationery that you use, the TV shows that you watch. It's far beyond that. The growth of modernity, or Western anthropological modernity as it is known in academic circles, is a very complex phenomenon. And once again, I have to take the help of what Professor Kapil Kapoor had written many years back in 2001, when he said, to modernity, he said, and I quote, "Man is central." Man includes women, of course. Man is the best being that God has created. Everything is for man. It leads to a philosophy of self-indulgence to produce consumer society, a philosophy of comfort, a search for comfort, a philosophy of individualism, imperialism, everything, because you are the Lord and Master. You have to pander to yourself, not cater only. Till then, God was an advisory, God was watching you, and in turn, God had to be watched when you were acting and living your life. This is the unending tension, because if you do something wrong, He will punish you. And then, of course, He is merciful. You have to repent. You have to confess. You have to seek redemption. It may come, it may not come. So God was a great opponent, a powerful adversary. And then it goes on. There is the whole philosophy of environment, which is controlled by this view. The relationship between the environment and this worldview, I'll shortly get to. And what else about modernity, which is quite interesting, is about the notion of money. Where did this notion of money come? This has dominated the Western world, and how the Western world has come to dominate international relations itself. There's a whole branch of international relations which deals with decolonizing international studies. I mean, our whole version of international relations and studies is seen from a more Western prism. I'm not blaming it or saying that, moralistically it is right or wrong. There is nothing right or wrong about this, but it's all about, as what was said in the beginning, perspective. That's why I use the word perception. In fact, another research paper from what I found out, which I wanted to place before all of you, is, which I quote, this monetary influence is not sympathetic to religion. Quantification, measurement reducing qualitative differences to abstract generalizations and mathematical calculations have no room for mystery. The whole preoccupation of early human life, or even till the medieval age, was about a spiritual mystery or something that was always elusive. Modernity sought to demystify it. And ultimately, what was this version that came about? And I quote, Hobbes, who was a great political scientist, posed that after creation, God withdrew from the world. Newton, as we just saw, reduced God's thoughts to mathematical formulae. Nietzsche, a great political scientist there in Europe, declared that God was dead. And Sartre finally explained that modern man has a hole in his consciousness in the shape of God, indicating that modernity had not come without a price. This is modernity coming full circle. And this modernity came to the East as colonialism. That's the next category which I've explained. Relations between peoples. When humans understood that they are not the same, they are not identical, there was tension. There are two views. Some political scientists believe that human beings in general are doctrinally intolerant. That is, my views and your views cannot get together, we can't agree, therefore I don't like you. That is one set of people in the politically charged domain. And the other is, let us agree to disagree but live together, which is more inclusive. These tensions started simmering, and with that came the industrial age of mass production. Never in the history of human civilization we understood that 1,000 books could be printed at the same time, or 1,000 goods could be produced at the same time. This industrial age transformed and swept the world like never seen before. And the industrial revolution was the immediate precursor, or the button which unleashed the Russian Revolution finally in 1917. And the Russian Revolution, like there's a famous book titled 100 Days that changed the world, the history of the Bolshevik Revolution. It really, really changed the way we think, and the world was never the same before. About the unfolding events after the First World War, we all know what happened in the Treaty of Versailles. And I remember Mrs. Hemlata Seshadri back in 2009 when she was handling the 10th class for us. She called me one day morning and said, today is the anniversary of the Treaty of Versailles, do you know? I said, I don't know anything about it. She gave me a paper and said, you read this and you're going to present this in the General Assembly in the morning, because this was the day in which it was signed. And from that day onwards, I started reading about it. And that's the way our teachers have taught us again, as I have already said before. The idea of war, the first category here, the practices of offense and defense. What is war essentially? It's not just fighting between people. It's about proving who is superior ultimately. And this is again a part of the colonial experiment. Colonialism has impacted human psyche, human consciousness, both in a way that no other psychological influence has. And this is my humble belief. The First World War changed the way the world thought about their people in general. The treatment of the vanquished by the victors paved the way for the Second World War. And the war to end all the wars was a war to start all kinds of strife. Then is about the othering. who is the other in civilizational studies? There is a certain X, there is a certain Y. How are discourses formed or woven together across the world? It's not somebody sitting in a corner of the world writing something which can change the world. But the way in which literature progresses, nobody knew that after Germany had gone into hyperinflation, the Weimar Republic was established, that the Nazi party was going to be elected. Nobody thought about it. And if you read Hannah Arendt about the origins of totalitarianism and how it came to Europe, it's frightening. Nobody thought that there is going to be a phenomenon, a Frankenstein monster like this. And this study by Hannah Arendt, which is again purely psychological, and increasingly I've been drawn into the school of psychoanalysis or clinical psychology, especially about events of the past. It's premised on a very important sensation that nostalgia is a very powerful feeling. And when you kindle or rekindle nostalgia, many unforeseen or unknown truths can come out. And that is how the psychology behind the Nazi movement or even fascism in Italy came out. In fact, Mussolini's regime in Italy was quite old, and it came in the 1920s itself. He had secured his position after the Lateran Agreement. All this, as students of international relations, you will study. We had a paper in university on that, and I did spend a great deal of my time reading. And Count Ciano's diary, this Mussolini's son-in-law, it reveals so much. He was a diplomat. And what diplomats wrote so much at that point of time, which means that all of us have to endeavor to write a lot in our own style. And that really opened my eyes when I read it to what was actually happening in Europe. Europe was supposed to be the most civilized part of the world during the colonial era. But what was really happening there was worse than anything in any other part of the world. And peace came at a huge price. The end of the First World War saw some of the worst horrors. And what Europe went through, even the colonies of Great Britain did not go through. It was something which left such an indelible impression on the human mind that they never wanted to see a war again. How many war stories, how many instances of what happened in the Holocaust, and the misery of the Holocaust was nobody knew about it till the Red Army went into the German borders. And ultimately, one of the camps was broken, and they found what was going on inside. And this has really shaken people up. And I remember how Mrs. Hemlata Sedar used to teach Marxism. Of course, she didn't teach us then; she was teaching the other class. But the way in which she sowed the seeds of interest in this, it has really made me go back and read a lot about these phenomena. And I can't talk enough about it. There's so much to share and say. But one thing can be said. The center of international relations, London, Paris, Geneva, got shifted once and for all across the Atlantic to New York and Washington after the Second World War. And Great Britain was even forced to borrow from the United States, which it never thought it will. Coming to the idea of peace. What is peace? Is it the proclamation of victory by the victors against the vanquished? Or is it treating the vanquished with dignity? Dignity, which I'm going to explain in international relations, is something which has yet to really become part of the mainstream discourse in the study of international relations and in the way it is practiced, which is very different. Peace came at a huge premium, and all of us must watch documentaries after the wars, after the war period. Terrible what the people have gone through. And suffering becomes such an internalized idea. The idea of suffering becomes so central to global literature after that. And global literature moves in that direction, and we hear so much of accounts of suffering of people. Now coming to a very different dimension of the whole study of international relations is about the environment. Environment, of course, it came into the picture only after we realized that if we destroy nature, nature is going to harm us. And that realization came only after the Second World War. And talking about what nature can do and what we have done to nature, the entire atomic experiment. And in the lockdown, as somebody was saying, has been a in some sense has been advantageous that I have had time in the midst of my professional engagements to read a lot about what was going on in the minds of people in India, the ruling classes, the princely states, especially about the atomic experiment, revealing. And the idea of the atom bomb, and in fact, I think yesterday was the anniversary of the dropping of the atom bomb. It showed an aspect of human nature that was totally not even anticipated. Nobody knew that it is going to develop at such a pace. America did not know that the atom bomb is going to cause this much harm, is what they say officially. But the Manhattan Project and the experiment in the Pacific Islands gives us a different story. It's a long story and I'm not getting into it now. Nature, what we thought about nature. Let me read to you the two different paradigms of what the Supreme Court of India has said in one of its landmark judgments on the environment. Essentially, the Asian paradigm of environmental perspective has been about conflict avoidance, conflict prevention with the environment. The environment was considered sacred. The idea of sacredness is central. The West had a different idea. Now let me read to you from what the Supreme Court said in a 1987 judgment, quoting the response of a native Indian chief in the United States. Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every clearing and humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. The sap which courses through the trees carries the memories of the red man. So when the great chief in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land, he asks much of us. The great chief sends word he will reserve us a place so that we can live comfortably to ourselves. He'll be our father and we will be his children. So we will consider your offer to buy our land, but it will not be easy, for this land is sacred to us. Then he goes on to say, if all the beasts were gone, man would die from a great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the beast soon happens to the man. All things are connected. This we know, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. This we know, all things are connected, like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected. This idea is so central, and ultimately, this one sentence sums up the entire Eastern and the Indian perspective on the environment. The end of living and the beginning of survival. We must have often heard many of our own friends telling us, you have to survive this, you will have to somehow survive. Now, survival, the ancients thought, was an existence below that of living. This is the civilizational paradigm. How do we look at a certain concept civilizationally? This is something which was not attempted in diplomacy before, but now it's being attempted. When I had gone to Mongolia in 2019, the presentation I had extracted this, and when we had a debate about, or a discussion later in the informal sense about what we were discussing, it was so refreshing. No, very few discussions go on in the civilizational realm. It's all an environmental regulation. This act was passed, that law was passed, there's a notification, there is a United Nations Convention, there is Agenda 20. But what about the civilizational paradigm? This is very important, and that has to form part of the legal regime, has been my belief. And of course, we are human, the next category which is interconnected, which is again about human dignity, paradigms and principles about the world order. The creation of a certain world order in a certain method, in a certain manner in which it is stage managed or run by certain players in the world, which is of course the United Nations Security Council, which we call in the modern language the SEC Council, or that's how we used to call it before, is probably the most powerful nations. They are probably the most powerful nations, and they get to access the most confidential information that is hovering around the world. And the making of the world order itself is an exercise in strategic studies. It keeps shifting. The post-pandemic world order is going to be different. They classified certain countries as superpowers, developing world, the least developed world. Later it became the only developing countries. Earlier it was the underdeveloped countries. Africa was not cared about. So many shifts happened. And probably one event which took India to the global stage and transformed India's outlook itself was, of course, 1974 Pokhran 1 Operation Smiling Buddha, and 1999 Pokhran 2, which really changed the way India was seen in the world as a whole. That was really a watershed moment in the history of the world in terms of the changing world order. We always read editorials or huge articles on what is the world order about, what strategic experts are talking about, what economists are talking about. Economy is also part of the world order. The balance of trade, the balance of payments, the way currency is managed. So all of this is part of a diplomat's menu, or what you have to know about. It's not enough that we read Wikipedia pages and draft position papers. And I have always been against this focused search on Google. I mean, I don't know. If we are only doing focused search, we know how to use the search engine good, and we are living for the moment, which is good, and we are catering to needs as of now. But if you really want to do something or accomplish yourself in this field, all of us have to do a lot of other reading. And situations like this, when ultimately you are confined within your house, you do have some time to read. The developments after the Second World War, who was the world being ruled by? There was a corporate class that came to the world, and that is connected with the last but one phrase that I've used, circulation among elites, which is part of C. Wright Mill's book in the US, which came, The Power Elite, and it's as acquired a status of a locus classicus, and I would recommend it to all of you when you come to university or even in high school. Circulation among elites is a concept of where people are first tradition oriented, then inner oriented, then otherwise driven. This is how people respond. And there are certain classes of people who control resources in such a way that they define the aesthetics of the period. What you watch, your TV shows, what you watch as drama, theater, your culture, the music, everything is dictated by certain resources which are in the hands of certain privileged people. That is the idea of circulation among elites. And coming to say, look at it. All of us relish a lot of Netflix originals, Amazon Prime series. We are looking at a certain lifestyle, a certain value judgment there. And let us be very clear about it. All of us have some aspiration about it. We do have some feeling saying, oh, this is so nice. I imagine myself being in this TV show. And mind you, when all of us come to university life, at least speaking for myself, I did spend a lot of time watching a lot of TV shows, and all of us are enamored about the lifestyle that is practiced there, and somewhere subconsciously it gets into us. This is soft power, which I'm going to explain later. These are all key concepts in international relations, and I really don't have much time, and I want to wind up in the next 10 minutes. The next category, ideology, sword and shield. This is something which has really again been of great significance, and with everybody's permission, let me read to you what I had written. Coming to ideology, the world is now divided between ideology and philosophy, and they are not the same. And in the morning when I was just taking some notes for this session, a string of thoughts came to me, and I pinned it down, and with everyone's permission I just read it out. In the journey of ideas, ideology manufactures ideas, philosophy invents thinking. Ideology is intelligence in implementation, philosophy is intellectualism in operation. Ideology is outward, philosophy is inward. Ideology rests on action and reaction, philosophy on the alchemy of activity. Ideology is sophistry in strategy, philosophy is sophistication in thought, word and deed. Ideology is a stock in the set, philosophy is a transcendental flow. Ideology is an influence of ideas, philosophy is a confluence of ideas. Ideology narrates, philosophy creates. Ideology is a scene, philosophy is the story. Ideology is a note, philosophy is its music. Ideology sensitizes, philosophy synthesizes. Ideology is a thesis, philosophy is a synthesis. Ideology competes, philosophy cooperates. Ideology draws on inequality, philosophy elevates identity. Ideology thrives in politics, Philosophy lives in political science. Ideology drives power. Philosophy is overpowering. Ideology searches for opinions. Philosophy reaches for the truth. Ideology is premised on universalism. Philosophy is predicated on universality. Ideology is a result of portrayal and imaging. Philosophy is the boon of embodied experience. Ideology sees black and white. Philosophy reaches for the gray areas. Ideology is judgmental. Philosophy judges. Ideology is evaluative. Philosophy is synergetic. Ideology is aspirational. Philosophy is inspirational. Ideology is a lock. Philosophy is the key to it. Ideology is a monologue in engagement. Philosophy is a polylogue in conversation. Ideology is a consumer. Philosophy is a contributor. Ideology is transactional. Philosophy is transformational. Ideology is a great servant. Philosophy is its supreme master. Ideology tolerates diversity. Philosophy weaves composite pluralism. Ideology unifies. Philosophy harmonizes. Ideology is mechanical. Philosophy is organic. Ideology is set in the circuit of living. Philosophy springs in the web of life. Ideology manages. Philosophy engineers. Ideology is information in action. And philosophy is knowledge in performance. Ideology charges emotion. Philosophy sustains thought. Ideology tends to exclude. Philosophy endeavors to include. Ideology resolves. Philosophy prevents. Ideology is used. Philosophy creates usage. Ideology grows in a domain of opportunism. Philosophy sustains a domain of opportunities. Ideology is growth. Philosophy is development. Ideology counts. Philosophy matters. Ideology controls. Philosophy liberates. Ideology excludes. Philosophy includes. Ideology is self-respecting. Philosophy is self-revering. Ideology aims at consolidation. Philosophy aims at coexistence. Ideology is a sword. Philosophy is a shield. Ideology is the heart. Philosophy is the mind. In its essence, in the world of ideologies, to the end of ideologies, to the end of ideologies, philosophy has proved immortal. Now coming to the next part is about trends in global academia. For a long time, India was only formally part of the world diplomatic establishment right from the times of Sir Girija Shankar Bajpai, who was Secretary General during Nehru's time in the Ministry of External Affairs, our longest serving Foreign Secretary, Subimol Dutt, and several other very distinguished diplomats who are also scholars. They left a very deep impression in the international arena on so many issues. And now in the academic sense, Indians have had a great impact. Then leading us to the next category, strategic relations. Strategic studies is all about seeing the unseen, or seeing something which is not foreseen, or asserting a certain relationship in a way that has got to be asserted considering geography, nature, resource management, arms, and the relative strength of nations and the cultural ties. Strategic studies is a whole new branch of studies which came up after, at least in my belief, much after the work on the clash of civilizations by Samuel Huntington. But of course, strategic studies was already known to the Western world. That's how they were managing frontiers. And I didn't quote that. There's a wonderful lecture delivered in 1907, I think, by Lord Curzon about frontiers. Of course, in a very colonial sense, in the British sense, but it gives a lot of background to the frontiers of the world, the borders of the world as we know today. Multilateralism, a very key idea. We are all sitting here at one table in the MUN because we have agreed that all nations are equal in terms of their dignity in the world. Proxy and phony divided was about the Cold War. It was a proxy war, and nations were against each other. They were ganging up against each other. And what guts did India have? The courage that India had, that it chose to be non-aligned at that point of time. It really shows a lot of moral leadership in that era when the Second World War was just over. People were predicting a Third World War. And then the next part I've already explained. And then next we come to a concept which I have really studied and spent a lot of time and energy on: change and continuity. One thing that all of us find very difficult to accept is change of any kind. When we went to embarking on the online education, we thought that it's going to be very tough and we are not able to acclimatize to the online education. Then what about social change? Do we accept social change? Do we accept global change? The post-pandemic world, how are we going to cope with change? Coping with change is such a big thing. And we are all in our comfort zones, especially those who have the privilege of studying in great schools like this school. We do not know what struggle it is to manage change and to live with dignity in change. This is something which has really preoccupied intellectuals for a very long time, especially in India. And all of us in some way or the other have complaints. We either complain or we say that we are not going to accept change. But when it's convenient, we accept change. That's human nature. Each one of us has faced it somewhere or the other. But the study of change and continuity. Swami Vivekananda, in one of his seminal books, his lectures which came as a book, Lectures from Colombo to Almora, which is really one of the most absorbing books that I read during my college days. He says that there is a part of Indian history and tradition where even history dare not peep. That is that part of Indian culture or Indian civilization which really is eternal. This is going to be India's contribution. I'm talking about this in the context of change because this is an old civilization which can really exert its soft power, which I'm going to explain later. Coming to the next slide, which is about ideas and values, a journey in philosophy, which I just read about. It's a very key part of our understanding. What is ideology? What is philosophy? If we always think that whatever going on in our head is true and whatever the other person is thinking is just not worth it, we are not going to become diplomats. We are going to become negotiators, and negotiation is a great career, and advocacy is also a part of negotiation, but being a diplomat is very different. So we have to learn that there is a certain global philosophy which is developing about international relations, and it's very multilateral. It's a world where the center of it is everywhere. It's not in just one country or on one continent. Coming to the next portion, where we stand as one, which is dignity in plural society, which I've been asserting and trying to emphasize again and again, is where we really stand as one. In fact, the great opportunities that Padma Seshadri provided me, that when I went to South Korea for the World School Forum in 2010, I was thrown into a group of high school students from all over the world. How am I going to talk to them? How am I going to relate with them? 2-3 days I didn't know what was going on, and in the 4th day I understood that there was some common link between all of us belonging to the global community. And in the last day when we all left, I think the farewell was quite emotional for many of the people who attended that the forum for those many days. About India's rise, I mean, again, it's something which has been prophesied by great people, and India is once again occupying the place that it really deserved, the top of the world. And the growth of India has been a very unlikely story. From being under colonial domination, growing, and later coming into becoming a nuclear weapon state, and to becoming one of the largest service economies in the world, coming out of a balance of payments crisis, winning wars with neighbors, and turning the international tables, Indians have really proved that they are movers and shakers in the world arena. And I'm sure that all of you who have participated in the MU and those who have interest in pursuing careers in the humanities, you must go for it and really make the nation and the school proud in wherever you go. Again, about a strategic deficit that has grown after the pandemic is mistrust and distrust. Everything is looked at with suspicion. There is a conspiracy theory behind everything. And in this, I would just want to tell all of you, linking it with the next category about the consumerist empire also, where man is seen, man and woman of course, are seen in relation to certain goods. That's when consumerism begins, when we are consumed by consumer goods or any goods. Both this, the strategic deficit on the one hand because of false information, and the consumerist empire go hand in hand because of a very important connection, which is social media. Social media is, of course, one of the most powerful tools of effective communication, but don't believe whatever is put there fully. There is a difference between criticism and what is going on in social media. There are very different kinds of criticism. There is historical criticism, analytical criticism, appreciative criticism, deductive criticism, inductive criticism. Leaving all of this, there is a separate genre of I don't know what goes on there, which has really brainwashed minds and indoctrinated minds. It is not right for society to go to that direction. And like the great French socialist Emily Durkheim said, we are heading towards anomie or a normless society, primarily because of the game that artificial intelligence is going to play on us. We are in a very nascent stage in artificial intelligence in India. Social media is only a trailer, and we are yet to see the main picture. The consumerist empire has come to dominate us so much that whatever we see, we want to buy. And speaking even for all of us, which includes myself, there is always a temptation to buy, possess something, which gives you that thrill which nothing else gives you. Contentment is something which has really gone down, and we are facing a great crisis of the inner spirit. There is no spirituality, there is only a crisis of the spirit. When Joseph Nye, who was an American strategic affairs expert, coined this phrase soft power, everybody thought that every country is going to showcase its cultural assets and going to say that civilizational assets, we are going to dominate other countries with soft power, but that did not happen. One of the greatest examples of soft power, when Mikhail Gorbachev said that I'm going to do glasnost and perestroika in the Soviet Union, the last days, the one thing that he did, according to me, ended the Soviet Union completely, was to open a McDonald's store in Moscow. People waited through midnights just to buy fries and burger. That is the soft power the Americans exerted on communist Russia, which was just coming out of Stalinism and the Soviet politics. It swept the whole world, and that is the kind of soft. Even in smaller towns and cities, you do find a lot of American chains operating, and there are queues in front of it. Everybody wants to taste it and buy it. It's such a consumer temptation, and it's a combination of power, hard and soft. It dominates your mind so much that you'll never come out of it. Then where do we talk about identity in international relations? That is the passion to search for identity. It is missing in the discourse because we have not understood the world economy in the way it has to be put, and going where the wind blows has become a fashion. I don't mean to give you a moral sermon, but all of us have an identity of our own. We are unique, and we have to realize that identity in our careers. That is important. Lastly, I would only appeal to all of you to read a lot. There is so much of access to information that has never been there before in the world. There is so much information that in the last 200 years of human history has come out now after the World Wide Web has come. This is going to really shape international relations. And as someone who has always thought about developing interested youngsters in international studies, the humanities and social sciences, it has been very passionate to prepare for this talk and to address all of you. And this has really helped me learn a lot. I think that I have not bored you with what I have been talking to you. And my congratulations again to the school for organizing this MUN, to Mrs. Hemlata Seshadri for being kind enough to invite me. And I always enjoy coming back to school, and I really miss having not come to Coimbatore and spend time with all of you. And these are great years. Enjoy them. There is a pandemic raging on, but enjoy these school years and your university years. They will not come back to you. And at the same time, students and teachers and parents, that golden triangle has always to be kept alive. And I'm duty bound to say a few words about Dr. Mrs. YGP, whose death anniversary was yesterday. I knew Dr. Mrs. YGP in the last 10 years of her life, from 2009 till 19, and they were great years. I frequently used to be in touch with her, meet her, speak to her on the phone, and I had an opportunity of talking to her a lot about some current topics in school education, in social issues, and really the time spent with her was very treasured and memorable. And we all miss her today. And I remember the last time I saw her was just 2 months before her demise. She just patted my cheeks and said, "Are you going to do what I said?" And we got on to another conversation that we had 4 years ago. Great days. Enjoy your school days. Congratulations to all. And my gratitude to the school for having invited me here.